Hi, welcome to today's session titled, What's Your Why? We are going to talk about why you're homeschooling, what's your reason for homeschooling, and we're also going to touch at the end of this session on deschooling. What is deschooling? Do you need to do deschool? How do you deschool? We'll talk about that at the end of today. But the biggest thing that I want to talk about as you're looking at homeschooling as an option is, why are you doing it? And right now I feel like there's three main categories of people that are thinking about homeschooling. You have people that have been planning to homeschool since their kid was 3 days old, and it just so happens that they're coming of age during all of this stuff that's going on right now. And those people were going to homeschool no matter what, and that's just the path that they were going to take. That's group number one of people I think that are out there right now. Group number two is people that have been considering homeschooling. They thought they would maybe try it, they just weren't really sure. And then when everything went virtual in the spring of 2020, it pushed them over the edge. They've been at home with their kids, they've been schooling in whatever format. Either they full-blown started homeschooling using kind of traditional homeschool curriculum, or they've even been doing what their school gave them and they really liked it. And they said, yeah, this is what we really want to do. This is what we're going to continue to do. That's group number two. And then group number three are the people that are trying to avoid crisis school or what happened to them this spring. So I know there's a lot of people out there that are just looking and saying, we're going to homeschool for a year. We don't know what's going to happen with our school this year in the fall, but we don't want to take that chance or take that risk or whatever it is. And so they know they're going to homeschool for this year and kind of see what happens, but mainly with the intent of going back to public school, in a year or so. So wherever you're at on the spectrum is totally fine, because that's where your family is and that's what's going to work best for your family. So hopefully we can answer questions and give you some tips regardless of where you're at. Okay. So whatever group you fall into, or maybe there's another group that I'm not aware of. If you're in another group, let me know. We'll make sure we include you. But whichever group you're in, you have a reason why you're doing this, and you have a reason why you're looking at homeschooling. I would encourage you to sit down, take some time, if you can take some time away, which I know is also really hard right now, even if that's, in the morning before your kids get up or late at night after your kids go to bed, if you could just take a little bit of time away and sit down and focus on why are you homeschooling? What's really your reason for doing this? And write it down. Sit down, if you have a planner, write it in your planner or a journal or wherever you want. Write it down somewhere so that on days when it's a struggle, and there are days that it will be a struggle, tell you that, I can guarantee it, you can go back and look at that and go, oh, that's right, this is why we're doing this. This is the long-term goal, the long-term plan, whether that's a year of long-term plan or whether that's 5 or 10 years of long-term plan. Why are you doing this? So I would write it down. Go through, write it down. If your kids are old enough, share it with them. Maybe have them include what they're looking forward to or what they're excited about with homeschooling, or what are their fears? What are they nervous about? What can you help to reassure them as you walk into this new chapter in your family, whatever that might look like? So I would write it down. I don't probably write it down every year now because our why hasn't really changed. For us, our why when we started, and there's lots of reasons, and you might have lots of whys, but our main thing was we wanted to educate our kids with our worldview. We wanted everything that we were teaching them to be shaped by our worldview. We wanted to give them, for us, it's a biblical worldview of science and math and, all of those things, kind of from the perspective that we wanted to do it. We didn't want to have to come home and, reteach or explain or kind of try and go through some of those things. We wanted to be the ones that were instilling that into our kids. And we've always told them and taught them that we are preparing them to be adults. We're preparing them to be husbands and wives and moms and dads. And we want that job. That's kind of our job. That's what we set out to do. So that was a lot of our why. That's kind of the main reason. So when we first started homeschooling, I did write all of that down. I kind of wrote all those things out and made myself some notes. Now I just know that that's just who I am and why we're doing this. But it's nice to have that at the beginning to go through and know your reasons for doing it and to share them with your kids if they're old enough. Depending on the age of your kids and depending on the personality of your kids, I think that it's super important and super helpful to include them as much as you can. My oldest is very analytical. He's very black and white. He likes to know what's going on. So for him, it's very nice to be involved. He sits with me and looks at curriculum, and I show him examples and I show him options, and he can rationalize and think through and likes to know what's going on enough to have an opinion. And there have been times we have had one major shift in our homeschool from where we started to kind of what was the beginning of where we are now. And that was a point where he was very resistant to change. Even though he literally hated what we were doing, he didn't want to change it because he doesn't like change. That was the long and short of it. And he's laughing and nodding because he knows that's true. He didn't want to change even though he hated what we were doing. I sat down with him, I went through, and I told him what was on my heart, what wasn't working, what I thought we needed to be doing, and why I thought it was going to be a benefit. We looked through pages and pages of curriculum together, and we compared and we talked about, what the differences were and why it was okay to change if something wasn't working. And I asked him at that point to just give me, it was like spring break of that school year that we were in. It was like mid-March. I asked him to just give me a couple of months through the end of the year and see what we thought. Once he agreed and saw what the difference was and kind of how that was going to look in our day, I could see a visible change in his behavior, not necessarily even behavior, but his outlook on school. And it was a really big shift in our homeschool experience. It's been about halfway through because it was probably in his second grade year that we did that. And even as a second grader, he knew what he wanted and what he wanted to do, and I could talk through those things with him. I would not do that with my kindergartner. She doesn't care. She wants to do whatever the big kids are doing, and she wants to do school just because she's excited about it. She doesn't really care about curriculum. It doesn't really matter to her. So I don't involve her in those decisions. I give her what I think is best for her, at her level. So depending on your kid, I would involve them in some of those decisions. If you can, talk to them about it, set some goals with them, all of those kind of things. So before you step too much further down the path, write down why you're doing this. Why is it important? Give yourself something to look back on hard days. If you have kids that have been in public school or you've been researching homeschool, having kids in public school, you've come across the term deschooling. You've seen it out there, but you might not know what it is. If you've never had kids in public school, this might not be super critical to you, but I know a lot of people are pulling out of school right now and they need to think through these things. But deschooling is just that process of changing your kid's mindset and yours as a public school parent from what traditional school looks like to what homeschooling is. There's a rule of thumb out there that you should spend 1 month deschooling for every year that your kid has been in public school. So if you have a kindergartner or first grader, they're going to transition really well to what homeschooling is and the differences from, the year or two that they were in traditional public school. If you have a 5th, 6th, 8th grader, it's going to take some time to transition them from traditional public school to kind of just the home learning environment that homeschool is. So I want to kind of prepare you that ahead of time some of the challenges that you might face, and what are some of the tips and tricks. So I'm going to just give you the short 10-minute spiel on that, and then in the description or in the comments, wherever you're watching this, I will try and link to a couple more articles if you feel like you need more research on it. You can go down that bunny trail if you need to, but I want to give you some things that you can look forward to and expect. And it's a time that can be somewhat challenging and somewhat confusing. As a parent, I think when you make the decision to homeschool, especially if you have upper elementary to junior high age kids, as a parent, it might seem great and you see all the benefits, but it's probably going to be a challenging time for your child. They're coming off of a very structured, very routine, very do this next routine. That's their whole day. So it's going to be challenging for them to come home and have more freedom, to have more free time, to have more say in what they're doing. And sometimes kids are resistant to that. They don't necessarily want to try something new, but at the same time, they don't want to do what they were doing in school. It's confusing, and I'm sure it's confusing to them. So I don't know if that makes sense. But you might want them to do something that's more independent, or you might want them to have more say, and they might come back with, well, that's not how we did it in school. Well, that's true, and you're not at school. So how are you going to work through those things and work through those challenges? So there might be some confusion for them as they start to navigate the schedule and just kind of the more laid back learning environment. Even if you're really structured with your homeschool day, they're going to have more free time and they're going to have more independent time no matter what you do, because you're not going to homeschool from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. It's just probably not going to happen, not in a super structured environment. So give them a little bit of time to make that transition mentally. The other thing is they're going to be nervous about losing friends that they've had in public school and or meeting new people. If you are in a co-op or if you are in different homeschool activities, they're going to meet new homeschoolers. They might have some stereotypical ideas of what homeschoolers are like, who homeschoolers are. So those are some things that they might be nervous about. They're also building a different connection with you as their parent and as their teacher. If they've been in a homeschool or if they've been in a public school situation, and especially if you've been working full time, and I know there's lots of parents that are trying to figure out how they're going to work full time or part time or work from home and still be able to homeschool their kids. That's something that we'll probably try and talk about later on when we talk about different resources. But you're going to have to establish a different type of connection with your child as their teacher and as their parent. And that blurs a lot. And I know that's something that a lot of new homeschool parents worry about is, how is my kid going to respond to me as their teacher versus as their parent? And I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, because a lot of it depends on you and it depends on the personality of your child. My kids have never known any different, and people always joke with them about their teacher's really mean and whatever, and you kind of laugh about that. And I always say they better say nice things about their teacher because she's always listening. But my kids don't know any different. I've always been their teacher, and we try to have more structured time. Okay, when we're doing school things, mom kind of gets to say what goes. Or if I'm working with my kindergartner, for example, if I'm just coloring with her or we're playing a game or I'm sitting in her room while she's playing, I let her have way more freedom in what she's doing. My kindergartner loves paper of any sort. To fold it, roll it, cut it, fold it, roll it. Did I say all? She just loves paper. Anything that you have, she would make a mess. Anything that you give her, she's going to fold it up and do something with it. And if she's just in her room or she's having free play, she can do that all she wants. I don't care. She's going to throw it away when it's done, and that's fine. But when it's school time, mom's in charge of the papers. I don't give her the flashcards to fold and bend and whatever. I'm in charge of those. And that's kind of a boundary that we have to set. And that's something that we've worked through, that she and I are working through right now. So those are things to keep in mind with your kids and that relationship that you're forming, and that, different relationship that you're introducing with them. So there's some tips and tricks that I know some people have been really successful in kind of working through this deschooling process. Talk with your kids, first of all, especially if they're old enough, and talk about, this is what you did in public school, this is what we're going to do at home. How can we work through these things together? Again, like we've talked about, what are their fears? What are their excitements? How do you take those things to make a positive experience for all of you? At the beginning, you might have to go really easy on the curriculum. You might not introduce curriculum at all. I know sometimes people, their kid gets done with school, they know they're going to start, so they feel like, well, now we have to do math worksheets, and we have to do spelling practice, and we have to read, an hour every day, and we have to do all these extra things. You might just need to not do that for a while. You might just back off and do some of these other things that we're going to talk about, and then slowly introduce curriculum. Especially if you have a lower elementary kid, you're going to focus on math and you're going to focus on reading. The other stuff can come. There's plenty of time for that later. And we'll talk about that when we talk about curriculum choices and how you schedule your day. But if you're deschooling kids, don't push the curriculum. Give them time, give them a break, let them have that mental shift. Then you can introduce things slowly. What I always tell people when they're deschooling is go somewhere. And I can't really tell you that right now because you can't go places in a lot of, depending on where you are. I would always tell people, go to the library, go to the park, go to the science center, go to the zoo. Do things with your kids so that you are not just sitting at home staring at each other trying to figure out what to do next, but go out, be with your kids. How do they like to learn? Do you have a kid that loves to go to places and read all of the signs? Do you have a kid that wants to be super active, that needs to be at the park every day? Figure out how you can make that work right now, given the current situation. But if you can, get outside or go somewhere if you can, and start to figure out what's your child's learning style. How do they like to learn? Maybe what they were doing in school, they were doing because that was the expectation, but maybe that's not what they really like. One of my daughters, my oldest daughter, my second born, is a very hands-on. She loves games, activities, anything that you can do. She does not want to sit and look at a black and white worksheet. Not happening. No, I just don't even try. But if we can play a game, if she can do an activity with it, she loves it. She thinks it's the greatest thing ever, and she doesn't realize that she's learning. The math curriculum that we use incorporates a ton of games. So there's a lot of days where my oldest can come in at the end and sit and play a game with her to reinforce what she's learning. I can move on to something else, and she's still practicing her math. So figure out, how your kid likes to learn, what are the options there. If you can't get out and go somewhere to an actual place, try and at least get outside, go for a walk, find a trail. If you can go to the Y and do something, that kind of helps break up your day too. Because I know sometimes people look at this huge chunk of day and they're like, what are we going to do together all the time? So that's something that you can use to kind of break up your day. If you can just get outside, get moving. I try and send my kids outside, even when it's cold, they can bundle up and go sled in the backyard. When it's hot, they can at least go sit outside for a little while, and, and then they come back in. But that kind of helps to break up your day. That's something you can do. If you can't go somewhere, read. Find a read aloud, even if it's a kid's read aloud. Even if you have kids that are in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, read a book like The Boxcar Children, or what did we just read? Yeah, Happy Hollisters. Read a book with your kids, even if it's kind of a little kid book. Get them involved in doing something different. Kids love to be read to at any age, even if it's kind of a little kid book. That might just be something that you can do together that would be fun. The other thing you can do is watch YouTube videos. Get on and watch Mythbusters or the How It's Made shows, something that's educational and informational, but isn't curriculum. Just learn something with your kids. If you can do something on your property, if you can start a garden, if you have chickens or could have chickens or bees or whatever it is, find something that you can learn with your kids. Pick something fun and learn it together. Do those kinds of things before you introduce curriculum. Help them transition. My son just said origami, which would be another fun thing that you could do too. Cooking, have them do housework with you. All of those kind of things. Help them transition from the traditional school mindset to what home education really looks like. You're going to help them make that transition. You're going to help build that bond and that relationship. And something that I've learned so much in the last 5 years is I care way more about my relationships with my kids than what they're learning most days. You know, being able to have that relationship with them, the learning is a secondary thing. The learning is always happening regardless of what we're doing. So my 20 minutes is up. I'm trying to value your time and be respectful of all the things I know you have going on. So I'm done for today. Write down your why. Why are you homeschooling? Why are you doing this? Why is this important to your family? Whatever your why is, that's the right answer for you, okay? It's not, you don't have to tell anybody. No one's gonna come check it. That's the right answer for your family. If you've had kids in public school, figure out how to transition them to home learning, and your mindset as well. Write down your why. Write down your deschooling. Figure out how you're going to do that. Come back tomorrow. We're going to talk about learning, teaching, curriculum styles, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not actually going to tell you, which curriculum is best. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.